Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News here at the South Florida Conservative News Center. Friday, June 12th, 11:42 p.m. It is hot, but you knew it already. And we're going to talk about some more about what the Venezuelan exile community slash government outside of the country should be doing to try to keep themselves in the mix before they find themselves on the outside forever. And let's discuss that because we talk about the newest thing out of Machado and her friends has been, a manifesto that includes a lot of interesting things. We did a video on it, but nothing really to show that you're interested in running the government of Venezuela. And everybody else is crying and moaning that the vice president of Venezuela, who's now the president, is this week out talking to the Indian government and making moves on different things and so on and so forth. And like I said, very few of the people in Machado's group are really talking about governance. Now, I know we got complaints before, but you have to understand what the word governance is. Look it up. It doesn't mean freeing the political prisoners and the whole idea about an election. An election to do what? An election to become what? An election to become a dictator, an election to become whatever kind of organization, a theocracy. What is it that you're going to do? Are you just going to take the old constitution from before Chavez, which allowed Chavez to come to power, and just use it again and expect for something better to happen? There's a lot of things that have to go on, and that may be the single biggest challenge facing Venezuela's uh, opposition, meaning the exile community's opposition to the current Venezuelan government. So for years, opposition leaders have focused on, and you're seeing the same thing kind of in Cuba, but there'll be different financial, economic factors. For years, opposition leaders have focused on gaining recognition, exposing corruption, documenting abuses, building international support. Obviously, that's how Machado got the Nobel Prize. And those things have been necessary, and they have also been largely successful. The problem is that recognition and governance are not two the same thing. Winning power and exercising power are two very different skills. And if the opposition hopes to govern Venezuela one day, it must begin acting like a government now. The reason is simple. History may not unfold the way many people expect. Many observers assume the political transitions will come first and economic recovery follows. But in Venezuela, you may have an opposite being proven. The country possesses something that many post-communist states did not possess, which is oil and lots of oil. And that means Venezuela could potentially achieve a significant degree of economic recovery without completely replacing the political and administrative class that presides over the country's decline. I'm sorry, presided over the country's decline. Oil production can increase. Foreign investment is going to start returning. Infrastructure can improve. Government revenues can recover. We're putting money into accounts in the name of the government, but they'll still be given enough right now to operate the place. Living standards can rise, and all of that can happen while many of the same political actors remain in place under these new arrangements. And if that happens, the democratic movement faces a very real danger, not of defeat, but of irrelevance. A recovering Venezuela may decide it needs engineers, administrators, investment business people more urgently than it needs political symbolism. If the opposition arrives at that moment, possessing only moral legitimacy, it may discover that others have already occupied the space where future governments are built. And that brings us to a comparison that many people get wrong, which is Venezuela is not Cuba. The Cuban exile community developed over generations into a cohesive political force. They fight a lot, but in general, they are cohesive. It has its own institutions, it has leadership, it has media, and it has organizations coming out of its ears. Most importantly, it had a concentrated geographic center of gravity, which is South Florida. The Venezuelan diaspora looks very different. Millions of Venezuelans spread across the Americas and Europe. Some are in Colombia, Spain, Chile, US, places in Europe, other ones. They have established entirely new lives. Many may never return, honestly, may never return permanently. And this means that time may not naturally strengthen the opposition the way it strengthened the portions of the Cuban exile community. In fact, time is probably going to work against that. So, as economic conditions improve, even modestly, and the death squads are taken off the street and things like that, the pressure for fundamental political restructuring may begin to decline. And this is why I believe the democratic movement should be building institutions today, not after a transition, now. The first step should be a national property claims registry. And you're going to say, oh, there's some out there. Not to the level that we had with the Cuban exile community, and not centralized. Millions of Venezuelans left behind their homes, their businesses, their farms, their factories. My friend up here in Boca Raton, his family lost a beautiful, beautiful hotel. Chavez himself stole it, and they were left with nothing. All right. So all these properties, the movement, I'll say the Machado movement, should begin documenting these claims immediately. Collect the deeds, collect the tax records, collect the photographs, collect witness statements, create a database because it is before it's needed. The purpose isn't going to be for revenge. The purpose is going to be preparation for reparation. Okay. A future government cannot adjudicate claims that have never been documented. I can't walk in and say I own 500,000 hectares in the Orinoco Basin, right? The second step should be an exile registry. This is all pretty straightforward. One of Venezuela's greatest resources is currently living outside of Venezuela. The doctors, the engineers, the lawyers, the business owners, the teachers, a lot of the intellectual types, useful intellectual types, not the ones that we have at Harvard. A future government cannot effectively rebuild the country if it does not know where those people are and what skills they possess. The third step should be publishing reconstruction plans. Opposition movements often talk about democracy. Governments must talk about budgets for energy, infrastructure, police reform, judicial reform. These things all tie into the second thing of the professional registry. Get those people working in ad hoc committees to try to give you those numbers. At some day, let's say the magic wand is waved and you're in charge. And how much is it going to cost to build sewer lines in Caracas? How much is it going to cost to put electrical lines out to Lake Carabobo, right? Whatever it is. And you're going to have a tax policy issue. You're going to have property restitution. Those plans should already exist before any transition occurs because they're going to bottleneck the whole government, which is what you're probably going to see in Cuba with their list of demands already in place. Those angry debtors are going to be, somebody's going to have to pay them or they're going to have to work something out, but at least you have numbers to work with, okay? And investors want to know what comes next. Citizens want to know what comes next. Governments should know what comes next. And the fourth step is going to be to build archives, political prisoners, human rights abuses, confiscated property, corruption cases. Institutional memory is going to matter. If, let's say, a good majority of these people stay in some type of office, if all of a sudden there are 500 cases that have been carefully vetted and sworn to in affidavits and things of that President, Colonel Emanuel was throwing babies out of a window at one point because why not? I'm in charge. He's going to have to go down, right? One of the major problems that you don't see here is the uncertainty amongst the military and the intelligence people and things of that nature of what's going to happen to them when the music stops. So you don't want to have a hang 'em all mentality. It's like hang the super guilty ones, maybe, whatever you got to do. It's up to you. It's your country. It's not mine, right? So that's going to be in there. And the fifth step is probably the most sensitive, and that's going to be security transition planning. Every successful transition eventually confronts the same question. What happens to the people, as I said, who served the previous regime? The military, the police, the intelligence, the civil servants, the guy who went and got that 6 bags of blow we needed for the party that night. All those guys, potential defectors, are more likely to cooperate when they understand their future. Clarity reduces resistance. Uncertainty creates fear, and fear often prolongs authoritarian systems. So now let's talk about Washington, D.C., which is on our side of the table, the United States, right? Many opposition movements make the mistake of believing that foreign governments support them because they share values. That is partly true. Governments support partners who help solve problems. Governments don't want to support partners that are babies, that have to have me chew the food and put it into your mouth. The Venezuelan democratic movement should be presenting itself as a responsible future partner in reducing illegal immigration, fighting the drugs, protecting the energy infrastructure, attracting investment, and limiting hostile foreign influence. In short, it should strive to become useful. Useful partners remain relevant. That's why the people that are running Venezuela right now are being dealt with nicely to some extent because they are being useful. Symbolic partners often do not. And this leads you to another important question. How committed is the international community to a democratic transition? One possible answer may be found in where resources are allocated, because recognition is inexpensive. Statements are inexpensive. You see the shit that goes on with the Palestinians, right? Why isn't Venezuela's exile government doing the same thing? Because it's not fashionable or because they don't hate Jews enough? Who knows, right? Who knows? But all these things are not expensive, okay? So if foreign governments truly view the democratic movement as a future governing party, support for registries, archives, planning commissions, and reconstruction efforts should be viewed as investments in future governance. If that support remains absent, observers may reasonably conclude that the international community's priorities lie elsewhere. Perhaps stability, perhaps migration, oil production, whatever. Support for institution building may therefore be one of the clearest measures of actual commitment to Venezuela's democratic value in the future. And that brings it to the final point, which is the difference between opposition and government. Oppositions criticize, governments govern. For years, the Venezuelan democratic movement has necessarily functioned as an opposition force. But the next phase requires something actually more difficult. And in it would require these databases, plans, registries, archives, policies, administrative capacity. The future may arrive faster than many expect. Economic recovery may outpace political transformation. If that happens, legitimacy will no longer be measured by opposition to the old regime. It will be measured by demonstrated capacity to govern the new one. The moment that prepares, what would be the best thing to say? The moment that waits may discover that, I guess so. The moment that we're waiting for may discover that the future has already arrived without you. And this democratic movement that has spent its time cosplaying to some extent, can't say it's doing it all the time, but to a certain extent, and has not really dug into the meat of governance, could possibly see itself sitting on the sideline. So that's all I have for you. Had a little couple of whatever's there for a second, but it is a situation where, you're watching the train, and is there a cliff at the end, or is there a tunnel at the end? What is there at the end of this train? And this is the best chance that the Venezuelans are ever going to have. Don't F it up. So with that said, have a nice night. And I guess you're all watching FIFA. That's why you have to watch this later on. See you then.